Welcome to lesson 3. This one is all about your definition of the word productivity. What does productivity mean to you personally? Not to your boss, not to your team, not to your clients, not to your vendors, not to your family, but to you. When you think of the word productivity, what comes to mind? So here, start out, grab a piece of paper, grab a pen or pencil, and just let fly a bunch of ideas. Maybe make a mind map, or make a list, or write a couple of sentences down. What does the word productivity mean to you on a very personal level? And when you take a look at that, listen. What do you hear? What do you see in your mind? Or what words kind of just appear on the page? And chances are that if you give yourself a little bit of time, I don't know, 5 or maybe 7 minutes, you'll fill up a page with some ideas. Maybe draw a little picture, a couple of diagrams, or whatever it comes to mind when you think of being productive. And help yourself out. Ask some questions, right? Ask yourself, at the end of the day, I look back, how do I know if I was productive? Or as I look toward, from the beginning of the morning, as I look toward a day, how do I set myself up to be productive? Now, once you get a lot of information on that page, it's time for clarity. And really, brevity is crucial on this one. I'm going for a tight definition. I'm going for a Twitter definition. Now, those of you who are on Twitter or heard of Twitter, or if someone's ever sent you a tweet, you know that Twitter messages are very short, 140 characters, that's it. So you have to be very careful, you have to be very deliberate about what that word and what that definition is going to be and mean to you. Now, there's a lot of definitions that are going to come to mind when people think of being productive, right? How many things do they get done in a day? How many cars do they have in their driveway? How many days of vacation do they take in a year? Other people will look at productivity. How much money do they make? How much money have they made? What's their net worth? Not just in money, but in their value of life and their experience. So to you, it's really important that before we get too far, we're at lesson 3, we're going to go all the way to lesson 12 together in this online program, but we need to set yourselves up with this foundation. How do I know if today was a productive day? How do I know if today was a meaningful day? Now, if it helps, I'm going to share my definition of the word productivity with you, and you've got this in the handout. Remember that PDF, each lesson has its own page. So here you're going to see the page, and up on top, this is what I shared with the world a long time ago, and I'm going to share it again as this lesson is posted. My definition of productivity is essentially doing what I said I would do in the time that I promised. That's it. It's a short definition, and what I can do is I can set myself up in the morning, or at the beginning of the week, or at the end of a week, or at the end of a quarter. I can look back and look forward and ask myself this very subjective, objective question. Did I do what I said I would do? Subjective, well, I can kind of remember that, I can think about it, I can bring a few things to mind. Objective, I can go take a look at my to-do list or my planning software or whatever it is that I use to track my agreements. That definition to me has really been a foundation. It's been some flag that I can march toward every day, every day, every day. And by the way, it's not that I need to manage all of the things that I said I would do for other people. A lot of it is managing what I said I would do with myself, for myself, by myself. That is, if I told myself I was going to write an article, begin a chapter of a book, work out one particular day, call someone that I haven't talked to in a while, write a card to someone to say thank you, organize my office, clean out a desk drawer, get my car washed. You see, none of those are for necessarily anybody else. They're all agreements that I've made with myself. Now, I'm going to give you one more key part of this. When you're thinking of and really clarifying your definition of productivity, I need you to go after the emotion part of this, right? How do you feel at the end of a productive day? And blend that into there. Doing what I said I would do in the time that I promised, that is probably the most inspiring and engaging thing that I can do for myself. Why? Because it puts me back in a position of observation, of perspective, of control, really. Taking a look at what I have to do and what I have done, and then mapping and matching those two things together. please, when you get done with this video, read the article, go over into the forum and please share your definition of productivity. Oh, and if you are on Twitter, go ahead and post it there, and the hashtag that we'll be using is MWP Online. Thanks a lot, and by the way, if you have a little bit more time, I'm going to dive in a little bit further to talk about your definition of productivity. Super glad you have a little bit of extra time, and what I want to share with you is just a little bit of the background to why I feel it's absolutely critical that people have something to fall back on to really have a foundation of what they're in the game for in the first place. And what I thought I would do is just share a little bit with you about my own journey of finding this definition of productivity, and then giving you a couple more resources that you can go take a look at should you want to explore this just a little bit further. And the story goes a way back in 1997, and that was the year when I was introduced to a series of seminars that I took, some by Franklin Covey, a couple other seminars by Daytimer. I even attended an online, this is way back when, but there was a bunch of materials for, if you remember, the Daytimer program. And one of the seminars I attended here in Ojai was a seminar called Managing Actions and Projects. And really it was the first time when I had ever kind of studied not just what I had to do, right? I was a history teacher, Spanish teacher, I was a community volunteer. We were rolling out a library literacy and homework help center here in Ojai. I knew what I was doing, but I had never been taught, nor had I ever explored how I did things. So I spent several years really diving into the process, the how of workflow and workflow mastery. And all through along that time, you know, I got to do seminars and I started doing coaching, and I would get asked over and over again, you know, why was I doing this? You know, Jason, what's in it for you? And one day, I have no idea when this happened, I just know that it did because I reflect on the content of that all the time. I came up with this definition for me of productivity, and that definition is doing what I said I would do in the time that I promised. And I've written blog entries about this, I've spoken to audiences about this. There's a part of my upcoming book, Your Best Just Got Better, where I really dive into that productive, not just the experience we have, but where that comes from. And so what I want to share with you here are a couple of the resources, some of the things that I looked at, studied, read, and really allowed myself to steep in when it came to these ideas and these materials. And the first one is a book that is not at all about tennis, but it is all about the process and mindset of engagement. And if you have not read this book, highly, highly recommend it. Generally what I do is I find a copy in the bookstore, a used bookstore, I pick it up. This one cost me $2, and I'll send it to somebody, I'll give it to somebody, I'll just carry it with me on an upcoming trip. I'm leaving this one all the time wherever I travel. And the inner game of tennis was really the first time that I ever saw, and not just intuited, but really saw the power of the mind, the power of a mantra, the power of focus, if you will. And as I was reading that book, and subsequently, I've really kind of spent a lot of my time around what is my mind telling me to do, I could do, I have done, and what the potential is that's still outstanding. And so as you go through lesson 3, as you watch that first executive summary of the video, maybe you go do a wiki summary. Wikisummary.org is a website you might be able to go to and find a summary of the inner game of tennis. I know if you typed it into Wikipedia, you'd come up with a couple of references to this. And that book really explored and then gave me some solid tools to come back to on just the significance of that simple, consistent messaging, whatever the topic is. You know, once you identify your 140 character or less definition of the word productivity, my invitation to you is advertise it. Advertise it to yourself. Write it on a 3x5 note card and put it in your wallet or your purse. Write it on the bathroom mirror at your house or apartment with an Expo whiteboard pen. Email it to yourself. You know, there's a website I'm using right now called nudge.com, and this website allows me to forward or send an email and then put the date that I want that email to come back. And so this is kind of a neat thing. It's a tickler system, right, where I can have an idea or I can receive a message and I can send it and have it come back. It might be interesting to take that definition of productivity, that 140 character or less definition, and have it come back to your calendar every 5, 10, or 15 days. So that way you can, over the period of 2 or 3 months, really start to massage that definition. Advertise it to your coworkers. You know, I tell people that I work for and work with, I am the most productive I can be when I do what I said I would do in the time that I promised. What does that mean? Well, with coworkers, I might tell them by when I'll have something done. If it's a vendor, I'll ask them about when will they need information from me. If it's a client, I always give them a date that I will have something submitted or turned back into them. So that way I have that second part, right? In the time that I promised. Now I can back up to the first part. I do what I said I would do. And there's been a lot of projects, especially this year, that I've been working on. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've actually had to go back to the sponsor, the vendor, the client, my coworker. I've actually had to go back a few days in and re-clarify what is it exactly that we were going to do. You know, the best example I can give you of this is I just submitted my book proposal to a publisher in New York. And that 6-week process to me was fascinating. Because what would happen is I would start writing the proposal, and I had a very long document going. It was over 40 pages, the entire proposal. And what wound up happening over time, over a few days at a time, is I would start down a path where I would talk about chapter 1 or chapter 2 or the introduction. I would start talking about the market, all the different details of that particular book proposal. But then what I found is I kept having to revisit the PDF that the publisher sent me that was their boilerplate. It was their proposal manifesto, if you will. And I remember when I got that last month, the person that I met with said, here's our form, just make a Word document and fill in the different aspects of this form. I cannot tell you how many times I kept going off form. Then I would reread the proposal document and I'd come back and get back on track. Doing what I said I would do in the time I promised is not just me, by the way. It's tapping into my network. It's tapping into every tool, every condition, every coworker, every resource that I have. So as you begin to explore, identify, and then advertise your definition of productivity, make it real. You know, at the end of the last section, I said to make this an emotional definition. I'm bringing in just a little bit of the NLP information here. If you've studied any neuro-linguistic programming, one of the things that they talk about when they talk about goal setting is not just to make it a mental exercise, but really make it a physical and make it an emotional exercise where you're not just thinking about something, but physically you're seeing it. For some of you, that could be making a collage with pictures that you put out on a piece of cardboard or even an 8.5 by 11 cardstock paper, or more emotionally of tapping into that feeling of engagement, that feeling of productivity. Either way, this 140 character definition is something that I'm going to ask you for the next 4 weeks to keep coming back to, Even when we get to lessons 4 and 7 and 11 at the end of the online program, this definition might be one that you carry forward into your professional and your personal life. So, as you leave this video, remember, there's a discussion forum going on where all you need to do is to share your definition of productivity in 140 characters or less. If you are on Twitter, please, I ask you, go in there, drop in your definition of productivity with the hashtag MWPOnline. And if there's any questions that I can answer, if there's an extension of this video you'd like to see, please do let me know. Hey, it's been great so far. I'm really engaged in the camaraderie and all the conversations going on. Let's keep it up. If you missed a lesson, don't worry about it. You can pick this up wherever you are. Don't think that you have to catch up to where you are. And for those of you who are in step, welcome to an online course that could change the way you perform and the way you approach your productivity.